Hello there, welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Galaxy, where humans face the unknown, outsmart the impossible, and turn every test into victory. So sit back and let the story begin.
Galen Suri had reviewed 10,000 fighter profiles across her 20-year career as the Grand Arena's lead commentator. She had seen warlords with kill counts in the hundreds. She had seen gene-spliced predators bred for nothing but combat. She had seen beings from worlds where gravity could crush starships. None of them made her pause the way this entry did. The holographic display floated before her four arms, showing a profile so thin it looked like a mistake. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth class, 12 death world. Military record, none. Combat training, none. Occupation, structurale engine. The profile photo showed a broad-shouldered man with deep lines on his face and thick hands that looked like they had been shaped by decades of cold weather and heavy tools. This has to be a filing error, Galen muttered. Her assistant checked. It was not an error. Down in the registration hall of Rondar Spire, Daniil Volkov stood in a line that made him feel like a child standing between skyscrapers. The fighter ahead of him was a Brolian, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark green scales, with arms thick as tree trunks. The one behind him was a Velesi, an insectoid creature with 4 bladed limbs that clicked softly against the metal floor. Daniil wore a gray work jacket, heavy boots, and carried a translated entry form that he had spent 2 hours trying to read. The translation software on Rondar Spire was not built for Russian speakers. Half the words came out wrong that he did not care. He only needed to sign it. The Crucible of Flames was the most prestigious combat tournament in the known galaxy. It happened once every 10 years on Rondar Spire, and warriors from hundreds of species traveled across star systems to compete. The winner received the sovereign boon, a single request granted by the Rondar Governing Council, with almost no limits. Land, wealth, political power, military contracts. Champions had used the boon to reshape entire civilizations. Daniil did not want to reshape anything. He wanted residency papers. 3 years ago, Earth had made first contact with the galactic community. It had not gone well. Governments panicked. Economies collapsed. Millions were displaced. A group of 200 human refugees had been transported to Rondar Spire as part of a temporary relief program, but the program had ended 6 months ago. Now, the Council wanted them gone, deported back to Earth, back to a planet still burning through the chaos of contact. Among those refugees were families, children, elderly people who would not survive another transit. Daniil had promised a dying man on that refugee shuttle that he would keep them safe. The man's name was Petrov, and his daughter Nadia was still waiting in the refugee block, still believing that promise meant something. The Crucible was the only path left. You, a deep voice rumbled above him. Daniil looked up. The scar Brolian from ahead in the line had turned around. His name, Daniil would later learn, was Oren Medak, a veteran fighter. 3 Crucible appearances, a reputation for breaking opponents in ways that medics could not fix. What are you? Oren asked, leaning down. His breath smelled like copper. Human, Daniil said. I know your species tag. I mean, what are you doing here? You have no record, no training, no enhancements. Oren's scarred mouth twisted into something between a grin and a sneer. Are you lost, little builder? The fighters nearby turned to watch. A few laughed. The sound echoed through the hall like stones dropping into water. Daniil looked at Oren for a long moment. He had spent 30 years building bridges and apartment blocks in Siberian winters, where temperatures dropped to -40. He had pulled injured workers from collapsed scaffolding with his bare hands. He had buried friends, rebuilt what storms destroyed, and never once raised his voice about it. He was not going to start now. No, Daniil said quietly. I'm not lost. He turned back to his form, signed it with a pen that felt too small for alien hands but fit his perfectly, and handed it to the registration clerk. The clerk, a thin, four-eyed Sethani, stared at him, then at the form, then back at him. You understand, the clerk said slowly, that the Crucible has a 19% survival rate for first-time entrants. Yes, and you have no combat background. I build things, Daniil said. I'm strong enough. The clerk processed the form without another word, Daniil walked out of the registration hall and into the wide corridor that led to the arena complex. Behind him, the laughter had stopped. Not because anyone respected him. They simply had already forgotten about him. He was a footnote, a joke that would be eliminated in the first round and never mentioned again. High above, in the commentator's booth overlooking the arena floor, Galen Suri watched the human's heat signature move through the corridor on her tracking display. She watched how he walked, steady, unhurried, with the kind of heaviness that came not from size but from gravity. Earth's gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, higher than 80% of homeworlds in the Galactic Registry. She tapped her assistant on the shoulder. "Find out everything you can about that species," she said. "Pull their planetary data, evolutionary history, atmospherique composition, everything." Her assistant looked confused. "He is just a builder, Galen." Galen watched the dot move across her screen and felt something she had not felt in years of watching warriors parade through the arena. Unease. "Just do it," she said. The refugee block on Rondar Spire smelled like recycled air and old metal. It was a section of the station that had once been used for cargo storage, and the walls still had freight markings scratched into them. 200 humans lived here in converted containers, with shared water systems and lighting that flickered every few hours. Daniil ducked through the low doorway of the common area and found Nadia sitting on a plastic crate, sorting ration packs for the children. She was 26, with short dark hair and her father's stubborn jaw. When she saw Daniil, her hand stopped moving. "Tell me it is not true," she said. Daniil sat down across from her. "I registered this morning." Nadia closed her eyes. For a moment, the only sound was children playing somewhere deeper in the block, their voices bouncing off metal walls. "You will die," she said. "You know that. You are not a fighter, Daniil. You are an engineer. You build water towers and apartment foundations. You do not fight alien warriors in arenas. Your father asked me to keep you safe. All of you." My father was delirious when he said that. He was dying. He was clear enough, Daniil said quietly. And he was right. The deportation order comes in 40 days. If we go back to Earth now, half the people in this block will not survive the transit. The elderly, the children, the sick ones. You know this. Nadia opened her eyes. They were wet, but her voice was steady. And if you die in that arena, we lose you and we still get deported. If I do nothing, the result is the same. This way, there's a chance. She stared at him for a long time, then turned back to sorting rations. She did not say goodbye. She did not wish him luck. She just kept working because that was what people from their world did when the situation was impossible. They kept working. Daniil left the refugee block and made his way to the arena training grounds. The training complex was enormous. Multiple levels, each designed for different species and fighting styles. Gravity could be adjusted by zone. Temperature, atmosphere, even lighting could be customized. Warriors trained with weapons that hummed with energy, armor that shifted like liquid, and combat drones that simulated real opponents. Daniil had none of these things. He had been assigned a basic arena kit, a short metal rod about the length of his forearm and a round shield barely wider than his chest. The cheapest equipment available. The kind given to fighters nobody expected to survive. He found an empty corner of the training floor near a section of damaged scaffolding that maintenance had not yet repaired. While alien warriors around him sparred with plasma blades and gravity hammers, Daniil gripped the scaffolding bars and began doing pull-ups. Then carries. Then grip exercises, squeezing the metal bars until his forearms burned. A few fighters stopped to watch. Most looked confused. Some laughed. One did not laugh. Fenadori was small by galactic standards, barely taller than Daniil, with a lean body covered in short copper-colored fur, sharp ears, and bright amber eyes. He was a Sethani, a species known more for speed and cleverness than raw power. Fen had entered 3 crucibles and survived all of them, though he had never won. He was a mid-tier fighter, respected but not feared. He walked over to Daniil and watched him hang from the scaffolding with his full weight, then pull himself up with slow, controlled movements. "You train like a dock worker," Fen said. "I am a builder," Daniil replied between breaths. "I can see that, but this is not a construction site. You're going to fight beings that have trained their entire lives for combat. Some of them were literally born for it, gene-modified before birth. Daniil dropped from the bar and turned to face the Sethani. Sweat ran down his neck. Then they should beat me easily. Finn tilted his head. You are not stupid. I can tell. So why do you say things like that? Because I do not need to be better than them. I just need to last longer. Something shifted in Finn's expression. A flicker of recognition, like he'd just heard a language he understood but had not expected to hear in this place. Endurance fighter, Finn said slowly. You are planning to outlast them. My planet has higher gravity than most, thicker atmosphere, wider temperature extremes. I have worked outside in -40 weather for 12-hour shifts. I can take pain, and I do not stop easily. Finn studied him. Then he sat down on a nearby crate and crossed his arms. Your plan has a problem. Endurance means nothing if you're dead in the first 30 seconds because you do not know how to move in an arena. You need footwork. You need to know how to read attacks. You need to understand spacing. Can you teach me? I am not a trainer, but you have survived 3 crucibles. That means you know how not to die. Finn let out a sharp bark of laughter. That is the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me in this complex. He stood up and stretched. Fine, I will teach you the basics. Movement, defense, how to read the arena floor. But I am not responsible for what happens when someone twice your size hits you in the chest. That is fair, Daniil said. They trained together for the rest of the day. Finn was a patient teacher, and Daniil was a fast learner when it came to anything physical. By the evening cycle, Daniil could read basic attack patterns and use a shield to redirect rather than absorb impacts. As they left the training floor, Daniil paused. At the center of the grand arena, visible through the massive archways, stood a stone pillar under a dome of soft golden light. On top of the pillar rested a weapon, a war axe, black as deep space, with veins of faint blue light running through its blade. The Godfong got a plaque at its base read, "For the hand that does not break." Daniil stared at it for a long moment. Finn noticed and shook his head. Do not even think about it. That thing has not moved in 900 years. It is a monument, not a weapon. Daniil said nothing. He just looked at the axe, and somewhere deep in his chest, something heavy and quiet recognized the words on that plaque like they had been written for him. 64 fighters stood in the tunnels beneath the grand arena on the first morning of the Crucible of Flames. The air vibrated with the noise of 200,000 spectators above, their voices blending into a single deep roar that came through the stone walls like distant thunder. Daniil stood in Tunnel 9, alone. He had a short metal rod in one hand and his small shield strapped to the other arm. Around him, in other tunnels, warriors performed rituals, activated weapon systems, and injected combat stimulants into their bloodstreams. He could hear the hiss of pneumatic armor locking into place, the hum of plasma edges igniting. He stretched his shoulders and rolled his neck. That was his ritual. High above, Galen Suri sat in the commentator's booth and activated her broadcast link. Billions across the galaxy tuned in. The Crucible was the most watched event in known space, and Galen's voice was the one that carried it. Welcome to the Crucible of Flames, she began. 64 warriors, 32 fights, and by the end of today, half of them will be finished. The brackets were displayed on the arena's massive holographic screens. Daniil's name appeared in the 7th match. His opponent, a Velesi fighter named Reich, a fast insectoid with 4 bladed arms and compound eyes that could track movement in 360 degrees. Finn found Daniil in the tunnel before the match. The Sethani's ears were flat against his head, a sign of worry. Listen to me carefully, Finn said. The Velesi are speed fighters. Reich will try to cut you apart in the first 10 seconds. Do not try to match his speed. You cannot. Use your shield, keep your back to the wall when you can, and make him come to you. He will tire faster than you think. Their metabolism burns hot. Daniil nodded. And Daniil, do not die. I have bet 300 credits on you surviving the first round, and I cannot afford to lose. Daniil almost smiled. Almost. The gate opened, and he walked onto the arena floor. The sand was white and fine, blinding under the massive lights overhead. The arena was a wide oval, 200 meters across, with walls of dark stone rising up to the spectator tiers. The noise was physical. It pressed against his chest like a hand. Reich was already on the sand, his four bladed arms extended, his body low and twitching with predatory energy. His compound eyes locked onto Daniil instantly. Galen's voice echoed across the arena. And here we have our most unusual entrant, a human. First time, Crucible fighter. No combat record. Species origin, Earth, class, 12 Death World. This should be brief. The bell sounded. Reich moved like a blur. In the first 2 seconds, he closed the gap and swung all 4 blades in a scissoring pattern aimed at Daniil's torso. Daniil got a shield up and caught 2 of the strikes. The other 2 cut through his jacket and opened shallow gashes across his ribs. Pain. Sharp and hot. Daniil gritted his teeth and shoved forward with the shield, pushing Reich back half a step. The insectoid was fast but light. Daniil had weight and gravity-hardened bones on his side. Reich circled, struck again. 3 more cuts, arm, thigh, shoulder. The crowd watched with mild interest. This was expected, a quick elimination, but Daniil did not fall. He backed toward the arena wall as Finn had taught him, limiting the angles Reich could attack from. He kept his shield high and his rod close. He did not try to attack. He waited. Reich struck again and again. Each time, Daniil took the hit, absorbed what he could, and held his ground. Blood ran down his arms and soaked into the white sand. 3 minutes passed. 5 minutes. 7. The crowd grew quiet. Reich's movements began to slow. His bladed arms, which had been a blur of silver at the start, now swung with visible effort. His compound eyes flickered, a sign of metabolic strain. The Velesi burned energy at an extraordinary rate, and Reich had been fighting at full speed for 7 straight minutes against an opponent who simply refused to go down at the 8-minute mark. Daniil stepped off the wall. He moved forward, shield first, and caught Reich's next strike on the metal edge. Then he swung the rod. Not fast, not fancy, but hard. It caught Reich across the side of his thorax with a crack that echoed across the silent arena. Reich stumbled. Daniil hit him again and again. Each blow was slow and simple, but each one landed with the force of a man who had spent his life driving steel into frozen earth. Reich collapsed onto the sand, his bladed arms folding beneath him. He clicked his mandibles twice, the Velesi signal for yield. The arena was silent for a full 3 seconds. Then the noise erupted. Not cheering, not yet. Confusion. Schalt. 200,000 beings trying to understand what they had just seen. Galen's voice returned, and for the first time in years, it carried something other than professional smoothness. The human wins. By endurance. He simply outlasted the Velesi. Round 2 came 6 hours later. Daniil's opponent was a Grothani, a massive creature with stone-like skin and fists the size of barrels. This time, there was no clever strategy. Daniil could not cut through that hide and could not overpower those arms. So he ran. He dodged. He circled. He took hits that cracked his ribs and split his eyebrow open. And he kept moving. 40 minutes. 40 minutes of grinding, brutal, ugly combat. The Grothani, built for short explosive power, could not sustain the pace. When it finally dropped to one knee, gasping, Daniil was still standing. Bloody, broken, swaying on his feet, but standing. The medics scanned him afterward. Microfractures in both forearms. 2 cracked ribs. A torn ligament in his left knee. He had fought the entire second bout with injuries that should have left him unconscious. One medic looked at the scan results and then at Daniil's face, calm and quiet on the medical table. "You should not be awake right now," the medic whispered. In the fighter's balcony above, Oren Medak stood with his massive arms crossed, watching the replay of Daniil's fights. He was no longer laughing. He was no longer smiling. That he was watching very, very carefully. Somewhere between the second round and the semifinals, Daniil Volkov stopped being a joke and became a problem. Galactic media feeds that had ignored his entry now ran his face on every channel. Clips of his fights were shared billions of times across the network. Commentators argued about him on panel shows. Scientists published emergency papers about Earth's gravity and what it did to human bone density. A xenobiologist on a popular broadcast held up a scan of Daniil's skeleton next to a scan of a Brilliant warrior's skeleton and said, "These are comparable. This species has been gravity training since birth without knowing it." On Rondar Spire, the atmosphere shifted. Aliens who had walked past Daniil without noticing him now stepped aside in corridors. Not out of respect, out of uncertainty. They did not know what he was yet, and that made them nervous. The night before the semi-final, Finn found Daniil sitting alone on the floor of the training complex, his back against the wall, staring at nothing. His arms were wrapped in medical tape. His left knee was braced. The bruises on his face had turned from purple to a deep, ugly yellow. Finn sat down beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. "Are you afraid?" Finn finally asked. Daniil was quiet for a long moment. "Not of dying." "Then of what?" "Of failing. There are children in that refugee block, Finn. A girl named Sasha who is 6 years old and draws pictures of Earth from memory, even though she has never actually seen it clearly. She was born on a transit shuttle. If I lose tomorrow, she gets put on a deportation ship in 32 days. Finn's ears flattened. He had no answer for that. "I did not come here to be famous," Daniil continued. "I did not come here to prove that humans are strong. I came here because a man asked me to take care of his daughter and 200 other people, and this arena is the only door left open." Finn looked at the floor. Then he said, "Your semi-final opponent is Oren Medak." Daniil nodded. He already knew. He is faster than the Grothani and stronger than the Velesi. He has fought in 3 crucibles and killed opponents in all of them. He fights dirty. He will target your injuries, your ribs, your knee, your arms. He will try to break you quickly because he has seen your fights, and he knows that if he lets you drag it out, you might outlast him. "I know. Do you have a plan?" Daniil looked at his taped hands. "Survive." The semi-final arena was different from the earlier rounds. The sand had been replaced with hard stone. The walls were closer. The lights were brighter. It was designed to feel like a cage, and it worked. Oren Medak entered from the east gate. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters of scaled muscle, with scars running across his chest and arms like a map of every fight he had ever won. He carried a heavy curved blade in one hand and nothing in the other. He did not need a shield. He had never needed one. Daniil entered from the west gate. He still had his rod and his small shield. The crowd noise was deafening, but for the first time, some of it was directed at him. Not all of it was mockery. The bell sounded. Oren did not waste time. He crossed the arena in 4 massive strides and brought his blade down in a vertical arc that would have split Daniil from shoulder to hip. Daniil threw himself sideways, hit the ground, rolled, and came up with a shield between them. The blade hit the shield, and the impact traveled through Daniil's arm like an electric shock. His feet slid back on the stone. Oren pressed. Strike after strike, each one heavier than the last. He targeted the left side, the cracked ribs. Every hit sent white pain through Daniil's chest. He could feel things shifting inside that should not be shifting. 0.5 minutes in, Oren caught Daniil with a backhand strike that sent him spinning into the arena wall. Daniil hit the stone hard and tasted blood. His rod clattered away across the floor. Oren walked toward him slowly. The crowd screamed. "Yield," Oren said. His voice was low, almost private. "You have fought well, human. Better than anyone expected. But this is over." Daniil spat blood onto the stone. He looked up at the spectators section where the refugees sat. He could not see their faces clearly. His left eye was swelling shut, but he could see them. Small shapes in a crowd of giants. Waiting, he pushed himself off the wall. "No," he said. Oren's eyes narrowed. He swung the blade again. A horizontal cut aimed at Daniil's midsection. Daniil dropped under it, felt the wind of the blade pass over his head, and drove forward. He slammed his shield into Oren's chest with everything he had. Not skill, not technique, just the raw, desperate force of a man who had carried steel beams in frozen weather for 30 years. Oren stumbled back 1 step. Just one. But it was enough. Daniil grabbed Oren's blade arm with both hands. The Brolian was stronger, but Daniil's grip was something else entirely. He locked on and did not let go. Oren tried to shake him off. Daniil felt his shoulder dislocate with a wet pop that sent fire down his spine. He held on, he twisted his body, using Orin's own momentum, and threw his weight sideways. It was not a martial arts technique. It was the same motion he had used 1,000 times to redirect falling scaffolding on construction sites. Orin hit the stone floor with a crash that echoed through the arena. The blade flew from his hand. Before the Brolian could rise, Daniil was on top of him, one arm useless, the other pressing the edge of his shield against Orin's throat. The arena went silent. Orin stared up at the human, pinning him down. Blood dripped from Daniil's face onto the Brolian scales. For a long, suspended moment, neither moved. Then Orin let his head fall back against the stone. "Yield," the Brolian said. The sound that followed shook the walls. Later, in the medical bay, a tournament official found Daniil while medics worked on his shoulder. The official looked uncomfortable. "Your final opponent, Tessara Kale, has invoked the champion's pillar rule. Before the final bout, both finalists may attempt to lift the Godfawn. Whoever lifts it may wield it in the fight." Daniil stared at the ceiling while a medic reset his shoulder with a sharp crack. "How heavy is it?" he asked. The official blinked. "Over 300 kilograms. But the weight is not the problem. The weapon has a neural feedback system. It causes pain beyond anything." "I heard you," Daniil said. "How heavy is it?" Every seat in the grand arena was filled. Every standing space was taken. Every screen on Rondar Spire, in every corridor and market and docking bay, showed the same image: the arena floor, the white sand, and at its center, the champion's pillar under its dome of golden light. The Godfong sat on top of the pillar as it had for 900 years, black as the space between stars. Veins of faint blue light pulsing slowly through the blade like a heartbeat. 300 kilograms of collapsed star metal, forged in an age when the galaxy's greatest warriors walked among gods. And inside it, a neural feedback system that made the weight irrelevant, because the pain it delivered would destroy a mind long before the body failed. Billions watched across the galaxy. The broadcast had broken every viewership record in Crucible history. Tessara Kale entered from the south gate. She was Dravosi, tall, powerful, with silver-blue skin and eyes like polished steel. She moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent her entire life mastering the art of combat. For Crucible appearances, 2 finals, she had never lost a bout by yield. She was, by every measure, the finest warrior of her generation. She had invoked the Pillar Rule not to humiliate Daniil, but to honor him. Among the Dravosi, offering an opponent the chance to wield a legendary weapon was the highest form of respect. Daniil entered from the north gate. His left arm was in a stabilizer. His ribs were wrapped so tightly he could barely breathe. His face was a map of purple and yellow bruises. He walked slowly, steadily, the way he always walked. Galen Suri's voice filled the arena, quieter than usual. The pillar ceremony will now begin. Each finalist may approach the Godfong and attempt to lift it. In 900 years, no warrior has succeeded. Tessara went first. She climbed the steps of the pillar with grace and stood before the Godfong. She placed both hands on the handle, closed her eyes, and pulled. The neural feedback hit her instantly. Her body went rigid. Her jaw clenched. Veins stood out on her neck and temples. The pain was visible. Every spectator could see it burning through her like electricity. She held on for 15 seconds. 15 seconds of agony that would have broken most beings in threed. Then she released the handle and stepped back, breathing hard. The Godfong had not moved, the crowd murmured. 15 seconds was extraordinary. The longest anyone had held on in decades. Tessara descended the steps and turned to face Daniil. She gave him a single nod. Daniil walked to the pillar point. 200,000 beings fell silent. The broadcast feeds across the galaxy showed viewing numbers climbing past anything ever recorded. On Rondar Spire, people stopped in corridors. In the refugee block, Nadia stood with her hands pressed against a cold metal wall, watching a flickering screen with 200 others crowded behind her. Daniil climbed the steps. Each one sent pain through his cracked ribs and damaged knee. When he reached the top, he stood before the Godfong and looked at IT. It was beautiful. Terrible and beautiful. The blue veins pulsed slowly, as if the weapon was alive and waiting. He wrapped both hands around the handle. The neural feedback hit him like a wall of fire. Every nerve in his body screamed at once. It was not just pain, it was the memory of pain, every injury he had ever suffered compressed into a single, endless moment. The frozen nights in Siberia. The scaffolding collapse that had broken his back when he was 24. The burns from welding. The grief of burying friends. All of it amplified 1,000 times and fed directly into his nervous system. His body convulsed. Blood vessels burst in his eyes, turning the whites red. His knees buckled, but he did not fall. His hands, those thick, scarred, calloused hands that had built bridges and held dying men, tightened on the handle. The crowd watched in horror. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Matching Tessera. He did not let go. 20 seconds. His nose began to bleed. His teeth were clenched so hard that one of them cracked. A sound came from his throat that was not a scream and not a word. It was something older than language. 25 seconds. 30. The Godfang's creators had designed it not as a test of strength, but as a test of something that had no clean translation in any modern language. The closest word was endurance, but it meant more than that. It meant the ability to hold suffering inside yourself without letting it break the thing at your center. The thing that made you keep going. The old champions had called it the unbreaking. 35 seconds. Daniil thought of Nadia. He thought of little Sasha drawing pictures of a planet she had never seen. He thought of Petrov dying on a shuttle and asking him, with the last air in his lungs, to please keep them safe. His hands tightened. He pulled. The Godfang lifted from the pillar. The weapon rose into the air in Daniil's shaking hands, blue veins flaring bright as daylight. In the moment it left the mount, a resonance pulse fired through the station's superstructure. The arena floor vibrated. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams. Lights flickered and dimmed. Every screen in the complex flashed a single word in the old champion's script. Worthy. Daniil stood at the top of the pillar, holding the Godfang above his head. Blood ran from his eyes and nose. His arms trembled. His body was breaking, but his hands did not open. The silence lasted 10 full seconds. 10 seconds in which 200,000 beings and billions more across the galaxy stared at a broken, bleeding human holding an impossible weapon and understood something they could not put into words. Then the sound began. Not cheering. Something older. A low, rhythmic stamping of feet and limbs against the stone. The ancient salute. The warrior's recognition, older than the crucible itself, reserved for moments that transcended competition. That IT started in the lower tiers and spread upward like a wave until the entire arena pulsed with it. The stamping shook the floor and the walls and the air itself. Below the pillar, Tessera looked up at Daniil Volkov. Her steel eyes were wide. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her weapons to the sand, and she dropped to one knee. The final fight never happened. When the arena officials called for the championship bout to begin, Tessera remained on one knee in the sand. She did not rise. She did not draw her weapons. 200,000 spectators watched as the finest warrior of her generation looked up at the battered human descending the pillar steps with the Godfang still glowing in his shaking hands, and spoke 3 words that had not been spoken in the crucible in over 1,000 years. I stand aside. The old words. The formal yield before combat, given not in defeat, but in recognition that the Godfang had chosen and no blade should contest its judgment. Some in the crowd protested. There were shouts from the upper tiers, scattered boos from species that had bet heavily on Tessera. But the noise died quickly, smothered under the weight of what they had all witnessed. The weapon had moved. For the first time in 900 years, it had moved. And it had moved for a human. The head official stepped onto the arena floor, his voice amplified across every speaker in the complex. By right of the Godfang's choosing and the formal yield of his opponent, the champion of the Crucible of Flames is declared. Daniil Volkov. Human. Earth. The stamping began again. It filled the arena like a second heartbeat. Daniil barely heard it. His vision was tunneling. His body had been running on something beyond adrenaline for the last 20 minutes, and that something was running out. Finn appeared at his side and caught his arm before he could collapse. "Easy," Finn said. "You won. Stay on your feet for 5 more minutes, and then you can pass out." "The boon," Daniil whispered. "I need to claim it. Now, before they can add conditions." Finn looked at him with something between admiration and worry. "You are half dead and still thinking about paperwork. I'm a builder. Paperwork is half the job." The Sovereign Boon ceremony took place in the Rondar Governing Council chambers, a vast circular room of dark stone and golden light 3 levels above the arena. The 5 council members sat behind a curved bench that was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They wore formal robes and expressions of carefully controlled discomfort. They had not expected this. The chamber was packed with media drones, diplomatic observers, and a crowd that had followed from the arena. Galen Suri broadcast live from a platform near the ceiling, her 4 hands moving across control panels as she narrated for the galaxy. Daniil was brought and supported on one side by Finn and on the other by Nadia, who had pushed her way through security with the kind of stubborn force that apparently ran in the Petrov bloodline. Daniil's eyes were still red from burst blood vessels. His arm was back in its stabilizer. He could barely stand. The head counselor, a tall Drinithi with silver-streaked scales, spoke first. "Champion Volkov, you have earned the sovereign boon. By ancient law, you may make one request of this council, and if it falls within our authority, it shall be granted. What do you ask?" The chamber fell silent. Everyone expected something grand. Territory on Rondar Spire, a seat on a trade council, military contracts for Earth, wealth beyond measure. He had, after all, just done something that had not been done in 9 centuries. He could reshape the political map of the galaxy with a single sentence. Daniil straightened as much as his broken body would allow. He looked at the council with his red, ruined eyes and spoke in a voice that was rough and quiet and carried to every corner of the chamber. "I request permanent residency and full citizenship rights for every human refugee currently housed on Rondar Spire. All 200 of them." Silence. One counselor leaned forward. "That is your request? Residency papers?" "Yes. You endured all of this, the arena, the injuries, the Godfong, for residency documents?" Daniil's expression did not change. "I endured all of this for my people." Nadia's hand tightened on his arm. In the refugee block, 200 humans watched the broadcast on a flickering screen, and not one of them breathed. The council deliberated for less than 2 minutes. The boon was granted in the days that followed. The galaxy kept spinning, but something in it had shifted. The refugee block was officially redesignated as a permanent human district on Rondar Spire. Walls were torn down. New spaces were opened. Children who had lived in converted cargo containers now had rooms with windows that looked out at the stars. Little Sasha drew a new picture, not of Earth this time, but of the arena, with a stick figure holding something big and blue above its head. Galen Suri produced a documentary about the crucible that became the most watched broadcast in galactic history. She ended it with a single line of narration that would be quoted for generations. "They come from a world that tried to kill them every day, and they still learned to be kind." Finn and Daniil shared a drink in a bar near the training complex. Finn asked what he planned to do now. "Build," Daniil said. "The new district needs better infrastructure. Water recycling, structural reinforcement, proper ventilation. I already have a list." Finn laughed and shook his head. In a private room across the station, Ormadak sat alone, watching a replay of Daniil lifting the Godfawn. He watched it 3 times. Then he closed the screen, sat in the silence for a long moment, and began wrapping his hands for training. Not with anger, with something he had not felt before. Something that looked, from the outside, like the beginning of respect. Tessara Kale sent a formal message to Earth's new embassy requesting a cultural exchange. She wanted to understand the planet that produced Daniil Volkov. The embassy, still understaffed and overwhelmed, replied with a single confused sentence: "We would be honored. Please send details." And on the last evening before the arena was closed for its 10-year rest, Daniil returned alone. He climbed the pillar steps one more time, his body still healing, and placed the Godfong gently back on its mount that a tournament official watched from below. Why return it? It chose you. By ancient right, it is yours. Daniil looked at the weapon, then at the arena around him, vast and empty and echoing. It was never mine, he said. I just needed to borrow it. He walked down the steps and out through the tunnel. Behind him, the Godfong pulsed softly on its pillar. And beneath it, the plaque had been updated with a new line, carved in deep letters that would last 1,000 years. Carried once more, by a builder from Earth.